charge of protecting our citizens. And that's what played out over the last week. And not to minimize this event, a political assassination against somebody utilizing or employing their First Amendment protected rights should disgust all of us. But in the scheme of things, this was a minor crisis. If this continues down this pathway and we have an Oklahoma City bombing or, God forbid, something on the scale of a 9/11, Kash Patel couldn't lead an organization during this crisis. If we have something at scale, we're in real trouble. And he decided to stay for the second course at Rayos, apparently, which I've been there. The meatball is spectacular. But it shows that he lacks the character and the judgment to handle this.
Are you hearing that from people that you're still in touch with inside the Bureau?
It's been a steady drumbeat. And just for background, I knew and worked with Kash Patel a decade ago when he was a attorney, staff attorney, working terrorism at Main Justice. I was involved in the Benghazi investigation. I was involved in East Africa cases. He was a fine partner for where he was then, but he was a self-promoter. He's an opportunist. He does not care about protecting the Constitution, does not care. Two simple leadership things. Even he has no leadership background. If you focus on two things, mission accomplishment and the welfare of your people, that's a good start point. He doesn't do either. He cares about himself, flies out to Utah to have this spotlight on himself, taking credit for the investigation. Dismissing our federal, state, and local partners as being kind of insignificant in all of this. That is opposite to what any leader should be doing, undermining his special agent in charge who's out there. And let me just close this out with 2 points. The SAC, who is out there, who I don't know personally, and I have to assume, like most FBI agents, he's a qualified professional. But the SAC they removed just a few weeks ago. Special agent in charge, Maytab Syed. I worked with her for years. Career counterterrorism professional. Has proven herself in crises in the past. Worked some of the top, Mary probably worked with some of the top counterterrorism cases. She was removed without cause. Nobody was never told. Suspicion is she was considered a DEI hire, which I can tell you her qualifications are exceptional. She might be of Pakistani descent, a Muslim, a female. She's one of the finest agents I've ever worked with. She was removed. She certainly could have handled this crisis, no problem. The other person that was removed was Brian Driscoll, the assistant director of, the Critical Incident Response Group, purposely built to respond to complex crises. He was no longer in his job. He was actually with me in New York watching this all unfold. So if you are unqualified to handle this yourself, maybe you should leave the professionals in, the career professionals that have a demonstrated track record who can actually protect the American people and not focus on social media.
And, Mary, we don't even have enough time to get into a lot of the back and forth between Kash Patel and the Utah officials saying, no, wait a minute, this is how this all happened. Reading this, it made me... I loved everything that you said, Chris, because it just sort of validates what I've been thinking. Kash Patel has been operating in a way the last few days, like he's trying to CYA. He is not only trying to cover his behind, but he's also trying to make nice with the boss, with the president, because he knows his job is in danger for various reasons. Am I wrong in thinking this way about his actions?
No, I think you're exactly spot on. I mean, he made this all about him, right? Let's get video of me walking the crime scene, tweeting out things. And I cannot tell you how bad this is for the relationship between federal, state, and local law enforcement, that you would try to undermine the local law enforcement partners and bait them into defending themselves. Like, what are what are the American people supposed to think about the ability to protect public safety, respond to critical incidents when you're going to have a back and forth between the federal officials and the state leaders? So I think he's going to have a lot to answer for, this week on Capitol Hill, and I hope that the senators and the representatives will question him on a lot of these things.
I want to read a little bit from that Utah Department of Public Safety, their response to his tweet. Our stance, his original tweet was against all law enforcement recommendations. We demanded the video footage and enhanced stills be released. They say, our stance was that it was a unified investigation and all decisions needed to be made in a unified manner and discussed to determine what was most beneficial to the investigation. We did not recommend they not be released. However, we first used technology to try to identify. This was tried in an attempt to increase safety to officers that may be affecting an arrest without notifying the subject, and also done in an attempt to not have other innocent individuals that look similar subject to scrutiny by the public. This seems like how it's supposed to work, like that you work with everyone so that you're all marching to the same beat of the drum. Before we end here, I also want to shift just a little bit to the FBI deputy director. Dan Bongino. Andrew Bailey, who is the Missouri AG still, is now co-deputy director of the FBI, and he started this week. That's abnormal. Am I crazy? That seems like a layering over. It seems there's not usually team ups in the deputy director role at the FBI.
Yeah, so it's actually an interesting tactic you see authoritarians use around the world. So, Kash Patel, you're my guy as FBI director, but if you try to be too popular and you would just want to be popular with the workforce, Dan Bongino is my guy, and you could be out tomorrow. Now, Dan Bongino has somebody looking over his shoulder, and I'll just remind everybody, the reason that the FBI started to become questioned by the American people because the steady drumbeat by Kash Patel and Dan Bongino undermining the confidence and the trust in an institution that is populated almost to a man and a woman by career professionals who are apolitical. Any misinformation or disinformation or propaganda that suggests otherwise is patently false. The American people have been lied to, and there's no evidence of it. Just because you're being told it repeatedly, over time, you're being conditioned to believe this. It doesn't mean it's actually true. Does it mean the FBI is perfect? No. There are individuals, but we traditionally self-police that because the FBI has had a standard of excellence since 1908, setting really the standard for law enforcement and intelligence in this country.
They've all involved, whether it was the attempted assassination of President Trump in Butler, whether it was the attack in the church in Minneapolis, whether it was the assassination of the CEO, the healthcare CEO in Manhattan. These are all young men. They're all in their early 20s. They're all millennials. They're disaffected and disconnected. And Jessica, that's the thread between terrorism and criminality, and in this instance, a political assassination. It's the thread that you've got to pull on, that these are young people, young men.
And if you dig a little deeper into that, where do you go from there? Is that being extremely online? And the governor's right. This is not to take away from any choices that somebody made here, but to be extremely online, to have the potential to be radicalized by that.
You certainly do. I mean, the opportunity that we can, pick up our phone. It's a personal computer in our pocket, and we can be anywhere in the world. We can listen to things and see things. There are no borders, and that's a good thing. However, I know that in the past there were discussions about violent video games, and I know that that's been debunked and knocked down, that violent video games and the generation that grew up on them, that doesn't necessarily lead to mass shootings. These are people that obviously have mental illnesses, but they obviously have the ability to kind of lack humanity, that they can look at a person, like whether it's Charlie Kirk or President Trump or someone else, they can look at them, see them absent of being a human. And look, being a sniper is different than being a mass shooter. Mass shooting is much more personal and up close. Here, this shooter was about 200 yards away. It's almost like the God complex that I can take your life from here, but I don't have to be close enough to touch it or see you. So it's a very interesting paradigm in what we're facing right now in law enforcement.
And then, James, take us into the investigation right now as someone with a lot of experience within the FBI. What are they doing right now? What happens next?
Yeah, there have been a lot of criticisms. And look, I'll say this, to catch this guy in 33 hours. Now, initially there was speculation this was a trained professional assassin. And I think many of us that speak about this for a living and that have a law enforcement background and were former snipers in law enforcement or in the military knew that that wasn't the case. It was a very short range shot. And just the manner in which the shooter tried to egress out of there. If he had jumped off that building, gotten into a car, and drove off onto I-15, he could have been hundreds of miles away before anybody could have tracked him down. But to be stumbling around the parking lot, stumbling around the contiguous neighborhoods, you knew that this was an amateur. Look, there's a lot of work to be done. The first part is, thankfully, thank God we have this person in custody. Jessica, now the hard work begins. Putting the case together. I'm certain that they're going to attach murder charges at the state level here, and then maybe the feds come in. Is it possible to attach a political assassination statute to this, or a terrorism statute, domestic terrorism? Absolutely possible, and I think we'll learn a lot in the next couple of days.
James Gagliano, thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate it.
What's really happening here is that the Republicans continue to be angry that this was inside their movement, or at least inside their imagined community. Remember what they said. We were so disappointed it was one of us. That it was, in a broad sense, an inside job to the white American grouping. Not an inside job as in a conspiracy, I want to make that clear. But an inside job as in, we were hoping it was an outside job. We were hoping it was, name a religious minority, name a gender minority, name a ethnic minority. We were hoping it was, for example, like just hypothetically, a non-Christian black person, or we were hoping it was a trans person, or we were hoping it was somebody who we could just instantly paint as outside, but it was inside. The attack on Charlie Kirk was inside to our community. And now again, they're going to try to say, well, maybe he was a leftist, blah, 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 blah. But the whole point was they just wanted, based on not even ideology, but based on identity alone, they wanted him to be outside, not inside. And that factor continues to stymie them, as has the failure of the FBI to actually do the job correctly. I think in part because they were looking for an outsider. It seemed like the FBI was more, and conservatives broadly, were more driven to ascribe a propagandistic motive before even finding the suspect, right? Trying to say, oh, they really wanted to make sure they were trans before they even found the guy. And I think, rightfully so, that you might argue that all of that effort probably let him out longer. Now, luckily in this case, that didn't lead to more harm. This wasn't the kind of thing where they were on a rampage and, every minute cost an extra life type thing. But it could have been, and you see that because it was an insider to the culture of their identity, instead of an outsider, they seemingly were willing to let him stay out longer. The only reason he got caught potentially is because he turned himself in.